You have to pan the room. Are they eating?
Sounds like it.
Great things can come from loss. Have you ever wondered why a person would jump into a raging ocean to save a perfect stranger from a riptide? Or seen a vehicle pull over in heavy traffic to render care to another vehicle involved in a crash? It always amazes me when I see these acts of kindness where people actually stop to render care and aid to people experiencing physical crisis. As a paramedic RN, I've seen this happen, and it's made life and death differences for many people. Sadly, I've also seen people walk the other way when a person's experiencing a mental or emotional health crisis. Thank you all for joining me this evening. I absolutely appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to hear my story this evening. This evening I'm going to share with you how the loss of my family members has had a profound effect on me and changed my thinking regarding mental and emotional health crises. As a medical professional, I've witnessed many tragedies, more than I care to admit. In my personal life, I've also experienced personal tragedy through the loss of not one, but several family members due to the devastation of suicide. Jim, my father, Ben, my nephew, and Paul, my dear friend and partner, have taken a huge toll on me regarding the loss of my family members. After 30 years in the medical field, you would think, I would have thought, I developed some tough skin watching other people's tragedies and grief. But I was in no way prepared for the loss of my family members and the grief that came with that, and the stigma associated with suicide in the eyes of the public. This crushing collective experience set me on a path. It led me to become a healthcare gatekeeper. And in becoming a healthcare gatekeeper, I was able to care for people experiencing mental health crises. I also became a question, persuade, refer instructor, which was a perfect fit for me. It allowed me to go out into the community and teach people about suicide prevention and awareness, and in the process changed my stigma associated with mental health crisis and change others. So, February 6, 2011, I'm sure you all know where you were. I know where I was. I was getting ready to watch the Packers play the Steelers in the 45th NFL playoffs. Halfway through that game, I got a call from Paul's sister telling me he had taken his life. At that point in time, I thought that was the most devastating thing that I could imagine. 1 year, 1 month, and 18 days later, my mom, Lisa, and I got the call that Ben, my nephew, had taken his life. Devastating is an understatement. Life-changing is an understatement. I was by no means prepared to live with that grief. Upon returning to work, I had a conversation with a very dear colleague and friend about my concern for my brother and his grief over the loss of his son. And I had told Steve, my friend, that Robert had said he wanted to burn his home down. Now Steve knew that Robert had found Ben in the home and how he had found Ben. And he still couldn't understand why Robert couldn't associate home with home anymore. So I gave Steve an example. I said, you know, Steve, imagine if you had come home and found Adam, your 19-year-old son, the same age as Ben at the time, had taken his life in your home. Now, Steve and Adam are attached at the hip, just like Ben and Robert. Steve just looked at me, and he got up and he walked away. It was at that point in time that I realized Until it happens to you, you can't understand the gravity of grief associated with the loss of a family member. Shortly after that, I was asked to speak in a forum for the Journey Mental Health Program, and it was about addressing concerns and issues that survivors of suicide had regarding professionals in the field and how they reacted to suicide and caring for the deceased family members as well as the survivors. As part of that forum, I was asked to meet with the advisors and the administrators of Journey Mental Health, just to get a feel of what their expectations and their outcomes were regarding this forum. And I met with these people. And interestingly, they invited me to come to an SOS meeting so that I could get a feel for the people that would be blasting questions at us. And I did that. I came home pretty reserved about going to this meeting. I wasn't sure how I was going to sit there as a stoic professional and not be transparent about my own personal experiences with suicide. Mind you, none of these people knew about my experiences with suicide. So I did. I broke down. I went to the meeting, and I walked into a room filled with 20 people. There were so many people they had to call more advisors in to assist them. And I sat quietly while everybody went around the room and discussed their loss, shared their loss, told us a little bit about themselves. And when it came to me, I only hesitated a moment, and then I shared my loss with the group. Relief doesn't even come near explaining how I felt in that moment, sharing with people who also had blame and sorrow and grief over the loss of their loved ones and questions as to why. I felt comforted in this group. Shortly thereafter, about 4 months, I decided to join the SOS on a regular basis and become a regular member and help others to get through their losses. In joining them, I found a safe place. All of the bad memories kind of went away. I learned how to cope with my grief and my shame and the blame I had for Ben's death and Paul's. And I realized how passionate I was about sharing this information and my life experiences with other people. How I felt so inspired to do this. I thought that I would be able to help other people become suicide aware and help prevent this from happening in other families. Hope and faith returned to me in being a part of SOS. So good things can come from loss. You might not recognize it in the moment, but ultimately, in the end, good things can come from loss. By joining SOS and becoming a healthcare gatekeeper and a QPR instructor, I have been able to help other people become more aware and prevent suicides in their own families, hopefully averting any tragedies. Sharing these experiences has inspired me to continue with this work. And I'll leave you with this. Jean Adams, the author of The Dividing Line, has a quote that I love to share with people. She says, "Many people die many different ways. Some people die when their hearts fail. Some people die when their kidneys fail. Some people die when their lungs fail. Some people die in tragic accidents. It's very sad when people die because their emotions fail." Thank you all for joining me this evening.